All right, so today's condo is gonna be, today's training is gonna be on condos. Just wanna pretty much cover some of my process. I know that's a very limited audience here, but I have some people on Zoom that are watching. Just wanna discuss a little bit of how condos work for me. My processes and stuff like that. I feel like there's a lot of crumbs left on the table as far as agents or new agents not approaching and taking advantage of some of the condo sales, that we have in Miami. It's a very saturated market. There's a lot of condos that, we could take advantage of. And I feel like some of us don't do it because there's a negative notion on condos where they're scared to work with condos because they're difficult sales. Or, a lot of people have the misconception that condos need 25% down, when in reality, that's not, a real thing. There's other ways around it, which I'm going to touch on here in the meeting as far as the condos go. Let me see if this works. Here we go. Okay, so some common misconceptions, like I was talking about earlier. A lot of people believe that condos, you need to come in with a 25% down. Okay, that's in reality, you don't. You can come in with as little as 3% down, 3 to 5% down, really, technically. Another thing is association fees are expensive. Yeah, in some cases on the beach or downtown Brickell, yeah, you could see some associations as high as $1,000 a month. But for the market that we're working here in Kendall, the suburbs, the suburbia area, association fees can be as little as $100. And I see them average really, between 200 to 350, $400 max is what the normal that I see here in Kendall, Homestead, even Sweetwater, Hialeah, pretty much, like I said, all the suburban areas. Another thing is people believe they can't renovate their apartments or make upgrades to their apartments. Also a myth, because you can upgrade it, you can renovate apartments. You do have to get your association's approval to remodel your floors, redo your kitchens, your bathrooms or whatnot. So that is another misconception. You can renovate condos, just because it's not a house or a single family doesn't mean you can't do your own things to it. You do need to get permits like you would a house or whatnot. And the last thing is that people think that condos are a risky investment because special assessments, recertifications of the 40-year recertification now that a lot of people are implementing because of the whole Surfside collapse. In fact, condos right now, in real estate in general, I think all real estate is a great investment to have, especially now with short-term rentals being a very big thing. Not all condos allow short-term rentals, so that's something you do want to check in with every association to see what their restrictions are as far as renting out your condo goes. But some condos allow short-term rentals and some condos allow 6 months rentals, some allow minimum of a year rentals. Like I said, for a first-time home buyer, I don't think a condo is going to be something necessarily bad for you, especially a person that doesn't have the means for a big budget, for a single family home. A condo is a good way to start as far as having a means to be able to purchase something that's your own versus renting. And down the line, like I said, it's going to build value, it's going to build equity. And like I said, if that's something you want to rent down the line, as far as an owner goes, you can always have that option of renting out the home and making a profit on it, or maybe selling it and using the equity to buy another house. But like I said, a condo is always a good first start at home. I don't think it's a risky investment. It's something that, like I said, a lot of home buyers or first-time home buyers could use if they don't have the means to purchase something that's more expensive. A condo can range anywhere from 200,000, 150,000 to upwards of 300,000. It really depends. And a lot of people's budget meet that expectation of a $300,000 mortgage or a $250,000 mortgage. It really depends, but not a risky investment whatsoever, in my opinion. So a lot of people also ask me, how do you find these condos, that have 3% or 5% down, because a lot of condos don't have what's called reserves. So my process pretty much into, let's say, finding a condo that has reserves. I can talk to my audience as well. Let's say you get a client, right, that comes in and they say, hey, look, I'm looking for a condo that's, my budget's 300,000. I'm looking for a 2-bedroom and at least a 1-bathroom, right? Okay, so on the MLS, you're going to plug in this criteria, as you see here in the arrows that I pointed out. You have 300,000, 2+ bedrooms, 1+ bathroom, right? Okay, that's my search for that client. Once I have that in the criteria, you're obviously going to have like a map or a reference where they want to live in. Hey, I'm looking from 8th Street in Kendall all the way to 152 Street. Okay, the map search, I would obviously lay out here. I have from A Street to 152 Street, okay? Once you have your map area selected and your criteria from your client, the next thing would be, well, for example, this search, I got 34 matches, to give you an example. So the next part was right here. So once you get those 34 matches, you go down the list, right? You're gonna search for your client like you would on any lead that you get. Once you find that criteria, you have your list put together, you go down from the list, starting from the top to the bottom. For example, this one I'm pointing out because this one was an easy one. The listing agent was competent or was able to search and see if they had reserves. Okay, condo association does have reserves. What reserves are, I'm gonna give you a broad definition of it. Reserves are an association set aside funds for things such as repairs or replacement without the need for possibility of special assessment. To kind of break that down, reserves are, every association sets aside a certain amount of money each year, okay? What's called reserves. They set aside this money in case there's something like a major repair that needs to be done to the property. Let's say a roof needs to be replaced. Instead of having to impose a special assessment on the unit owners, they pull from this reserve fund. And why is that important? Because lenders look at the reserves or the budget of an association to make sure that they can lend the money out with a little down payment such as 3 to 5%. That's what we're harping on here. You want to be able to find clients or condos that have that eligibility of the 3 to 5% down. And what you need to look for is reserves, like I pointed out here. Some agents will put it in the broker remarks and they'll state, hey, this association has reserves, the budget is attached. Okay, with those two things alone, you could send the budget to your lender that you work with or you partner with and tell her, hey, I need you to review this budget. Make sure that the condo does have the appropriate reserves in order to qualify for the 3 to 5%, 3 to or 5% down payment. Not all agents are going to put this in the remarks, and that's where it gets tricky because some agents ask me, okay, what happens if they don't have it in the remarks? Do I have to call the association? Do I have to call the listing agent? No, there's other ways around this where you could avoid having to call the agent or call the association, which is my next slide. I'm going to show you now how I find that. So let's say the next listing that I come across, right? Okay, this one looks good. The pictures are, well, I think this might be a possibility for my client. Now, this one, as you could read in the broker remarks, they don't state anything about budget or reserves. There's nothing in the attachments. How do I find out if this association has reserves? Okay, so what I do is I'll copy and paste the address. I'll open up a separate link on the MLS. So I can show you here. This is what it looks like. I'll plug in, let's say, that subject address. I'll put it in the map search. I'll put closed sales within 300 days. Okay. The reason I do this is to get a list of options that I've already closed, as you can see here. So after I plug in the subject address and closed sales, I'll see all these closed sales that have closed, right? And I know that subject property is in the complex of Elan, okay, or the association is called Elan. So I'll work my way down the list and I'll find one listing that has already closed that might state if that association has reserves or a budget attached, okay? So in this scenario, let's say I went down the list. This was one of the closed sales that I went for on the list. This person or this listing agent put condo very well maintained, association has 10% reserves in the remarks. Right there, that gives me clue that they have reserves, and this person also attached association. Okay, it saves me time. It saves the listing agent time from you having to reach out to them and asking them if the association has reserves. You could find this on your own through a closed sale search. Okay, it's a lot easier and it saves you time. And with the budget, you can send it to your lender, and you pretty much know whether that association has reserves or not. At the end of the day, it's just a way to save yourself time and give your client more options. As far as when you send them a list, you can send them a lot of options that has reserves. You don't want to send your client options of condos and they qualify only with 5% down. You don't want to send them options that that are only 25% down, because at the end of the day, you're sending them options that they're not going to be able to purchase. So that's how I go about finding, at least if listings have reserves or associations have reserves, or finding the budget so I could send to my lender. Partner with a lender. A lender is going to be your best friend when it comes to this, because your lender will be able to tell you, hey, with this budget, in 5 minutes, I could tell if they have reserves or not, and then if they have the reserves, then more likely than not, that purchaser could, or that buyer could come in with the 3 to 5% down payment. Okay. Not everybody has 25% down. It's a lot, on a $300,000 condo, you're talking about over $75,000, imagine how that could help a lot of an average buyer with a 5% down payment, that's the biggest difference there. And that's why I work with a lot of condo sales, because people they shy away from condos because they believe all condos need 25%. And that's a big myth. And actually, a lot of my sales during the pandemic were condos because the single family market was so hard to get into at that time. There was so much competition that condos I relied on because I was getting a lot of leads from it. And I was able to find a lot of clients, condos that have reserves and have, the ability to purchase with 3 to 5% down. Okay. This is an example of what a budget looks like in the attachments. If the listing agent posts it, you could go through there. If you have to go through the association, this is what a budget will look like. Just make sure you're always getting the current year's budget, because if you're getting an outdated budget, an association could have reserves last year, but this year they cannot. So last year they might have qualified to go with 5% down, and this year they don't because of whatever reason. Maybe they have to make a major repair and they depleted the reserve fund. So they don't have, the ability to come in with 5%. So just make sure you always have the updated budget. 2023, we're in this year, the current year that you're in. I don't know how to read this. Your lender will know how to read this. Okay. You could practice, or you have your lender teach you how to read it. I never really cared to learn. I just send it to her, and she's always, giving me the green light, whether they have the reserves or not. If they have the reserves, I check it down, and that's one of the options I'm sending to my client. If they don't, you're on to the next one. Okay. The next slide talks about, okay, what happens if I'm not getting enough options for my client? Let's say the area that you're looking in, I can't find any associations that have reserves. Do I lose the client at that point? Do I give up on them? I would not give up on them, okay? Because there's another option called HELOC, or second mortgage, okay? Where in the regard that if, let's say, you can't come in with the 25%, they could come in with 10% and they finance the other 15% as part of the down payment. Okay, so you have that option in case the 25% does not work, or the 5% does not work, for that matter. Okay, you got to talk to your lender and see if that is an option for your client, because you do need a good credit to qualify, with a second mortgage or a HELOC. But that benefit I broke down here, as you can see, I don't always recommend it as your first option nor a last option. It really depends on each circumstance, because if you can't find your client association that has reserves, then I would revert to this as a second option, because it's an option that could still come in with 10%. It might not be 3 to 5% down. It's 10% down, but they could finance the other 15% into the mortgage payment. And that way, you'll still be able to give them more options as far as that goes, because there's a lot more associations that don't have reserves and do have reserves. It also has a flexible repayment option where you could pay off that second mortgage without an issue. It's added on as part of your mortgage payment in a way. So every time you're paying your mortgage payment, you're paying that second, or that line of credit that you use in order to use as your down payment. It gives your client more options at the end of the day. If you can't come in, or you can't find an association, like I said earlier, with 3 to 5% down, this gives you a lot more options as far as associations that require 25%. I closed a couple of deals like this, actually did one recently where there was a special assessment involved. The association had no reserves, and the client really wanted the place, and she wanted to live in this specific community. She wouldn't live in any other community. She wanted to live in this one because she had family members in it, and so what for it. So we ended up finding the second loan, or the HELOC option. She was able to come in with 10%, and they financed the other 15% into the mortgage, and she was able to do it with 25%, technically, if you look at it that way. So that way, don't discourage, if you can't find your clients an association that has reserves, this is always an option I would provide to them as a last resort sort of thing, to see if you're able to close them. Okay. And there's also something called approved list that I didn't talk about. Approved list, every lender or every specific lender has their own condo approved list. With the condo approved list, they have specific associations that are already approved that you could come in with 3 to 5% down. You could always ask your lender, hey, do you have a condo approved list? With that condo approved list, you could definitely get it, look at it, and see the associations that have it, kind of to save yourself time. Instead of having to go one by the MLS, you can kind of narrow them down to associations that do have it. You go to that association and find out if there's any available condos for sale in that specific one. With that, it saves you time because the lender doesn't have to go through a condo approval process, find out about if they have reserves and all that. It's already an approved condo. They've closed the sale in that association, so they know that the 3 to 5% down payment will work. Like I said, every condo or every lender for that matter will have an approved list. But if you find a condo that doesn't have, or it's not inside that approved list, that's when you do the search that I mentioned earlier. You go down, you look for the description, look in the broker remarks. I don't know how many agents don't read the broker remarks, and there's so many questions that could be answered through there versus having to call the listing agent and ask them a question that's already in the remarks. Okay, like I showed you earlier, this condo association has reserves, or the budget is attached. With those two things right there, you're able to answer your own questions and send that to your lender and find out if they have, the appropriate reserves necessary to come in with a 3 to 5% down payment. Don't shy away from condos. I know people get scared of them. They're a little bit trickier than obviously a single family sale or single family residence. But most condos now I've been closing within 3 to 4 weeks. You have to go through the association, get the approval, and obviously, find out if they qualify for that specific condo that you're looking for. Okay. There's not much to it. I'm willing to sit down with anybody that wants to learn more in detail, one-on-one. Let's say you have a client that you're working that has a budget, a very strict budget, and they're looking in a specific area. Let me know and I'll sit down with you and I'll help you find these associations that have reserves. You can always reflect on my training and look back and see how I find them through the closed sales. Just by the closed sales alone is something that's helped me so much, and it's avoided people don't want to call the association. They don't want to call the listing agent and find out if this association has reserves. Sometimes the listing agent doesn't even know if they have reserves. It's crazy. As a listing agent, if I'm listing a condo myself, I'm going to do my due diligence and I'm going to go and find out to the association, either get the budget to be able to post it on the MLS to answer an agent like mine or me that's looking for with a buyer that wants to know if they have reserves. So as a competent listing agent, you always want to at least put that in the description. The association has reserves, budget is attached. And if they don't, list it that the association doesn't have reserves. So I'm not wasting my time having to go through my lender, having to have her read the budget for me. But like I said, condos are a very, very good way to start in real estate, especially because there's not a lot of competition on them, in my opinion. Okay. A condo at 300,000 at 3% commission, you're leaving $9,000 on the table in commission if you just don't want to work with a client because they're a condo sale. I started out in this industry with condos mainly, and it's gotten to me where I am now because, like I said, there are some condos that I have learned through the lending side and through the sales side. There are many things that have brought me up to speed and have got me to where I am today, because of where I started in condo sales. And you work your way up from there. Okay. That's pretty much all I have for you guys. Yeah. What's up?
I have 2 questions. Question number 1, I'm one of these people, I shy away from condos just because I'm afraid of them.
Yeah.
Fear of the unknown more than anything. I have had some bad experiences and there was a lot of poor education on my end. My question to you is I have seen a lot of condos that are not financeable, they're cash only, and usually has something to do with a special assessment or something. So
Yeah.
do you know how that plays into the financing or why? I never asked because I didn't want to sound stupid, to be honest with you, but I'm gonna.
If they have a special assessment,
Yeah, like why does that make it not financeable?
because they don't have reserves usually. If usually an association is imposing a special assessment, it's because they don't have a reserve fund to pull from to make the repairs necessary. And a lender typically will look at that as, hey, this association is not responsible. They don't have reserves. They can impose a special assessment at any time for that buyer. So they don't want, they feel it's more of a risky situation to lend somebody that money at a 3% or 5% down, and then they impose a special assessment down the line because they don't have reserves.
Sasha might want to jump in on this. My issue
That makes sense.
Was more of a title issue.
Because
the special, maybe you can help me, maybe you can help them. So I had a file last year that after like 3 months of the girl was about to do a hard money loan because we were so desperate. She only wanted that condo and that place or whatever. It was a nightmare. And there was some issue where the unit did not have a lien or a violation, or I don't know what the right term is, but the association of the building did. The seller was going to pay the special assessment in full, but for whatever reason, we could not get free and clear marketable title, so it ended up.
Title's a different subject.
No,
There, that's right, yeah.
because I'm trying to understand, like, what's the point that you step away? Because I'm at the point already, like when I do search for a condo where I will filter out anything that's cash only. But not all listing agents, as you mentioned, really know.
Yeah.
I've listed several condos and not known
About,
until
yeah.
after the fact that, you ram your head into the wall, but that's why we're doing this training, so you guys don't have to make the mistakes that maybe I or maybe you have made in the past, right?
Yeah.
So, I wanna know what to stay away from, or what to look for that's really important to me as a buyer agent.
I mean, open violations and stuff like that, if they disclose that on the
So you
MLS.
Close and finance to deal with a special assessment?
Yes, yeah, I've done it. I've done it
Which
recently. Yeah, me and Sasha, well, me and you just did one last year with my cut with,
Is current litigation.
yeah. Open.
Because litigation almost falls into like a lending issue, but for title, it doesn't.
And here in G code, if you remember, my first ever sale, you helped me with it. It was a condo with a litigation. And I think that it has, in that aspect, it has to do with if the litigation is a structural issue with the building.
Right.
Or if
it's
it's
like a
just-
personal thing.
And the issue that the building had was like, the association was getting sued because the paint color wasn't the color that the board had agreed on, and it requires more of an in-depth training. The other day, as a matter of fact, I sat into a PRNG training for condos, and they were showing us how to find litigation and how to determine, that's great, maybe we should have some other.
Yeah. I mean, just because a condo, guys, and whoever's on the Zoom, I mean, just because there's a condo that has a special assessment, doesn't mean you can't finance it, okay? You're definitely gonna come in with they're gonna have to come in with a 25% down, but like I mentioned earlier about the HELOC option, where they could come in with 10% and they finance the other 15. Sasha and I did a deal together last year that it was a similar situation. There was a special assessment. My lender was able to get that client to come in with a HELOC option, which was only put 10% down and the other 50% was financed. Did they, they take into account the special assessment amount into the mortgage, and they qualify them with that special assessment included as part of their mortgage payment, because they know that's gonna be something there.
Special assessments like condos in Illinois, title wise or like whatever, but the way we look at special assessment is sometimes you also need to call the association, especially as a listing agent, and ask what your seller should be anticipating if there is a known special assessment. Because I've had addendums or contracts that read buyer will continue to pay the special assessment after closing. And then I receive an estoppel letter from the association that says in big bold font, seller must pay special assessment in full at the time of closing. And I'm like, okay, I've got a direct contradiction here. Like these people have signed a contract where the buyer is willing to pay because they signed their contract, but the association isn't gonna allow it. Had the listing agent called the association, they would have known that right from the start.
Exactly.
And they could have better prepared that seller, like, hey, heads up, when you go to sell this property, like, let's maybe ask for a couple $1,000s more, let's try to accept the highest offer, because you're gonna get stuck paying that special assessment in full. Whereas I've had sellers that are like super upset at the time of closing, like nobody told me I was gonna have to pay the special assessment in full, and it's $10,000, That's one thing I've run into. And another thing I've run into is what you're saying of marketable title, a title issue. The only hard stops that we really have when it comes to condos is if they have a lien against the building that cannot be released. If it cannot be released,
Full harvest is mentioned, but you're trying to.
well, harvests are fine when it comes to cash or some private lenders, but if I've had issues where, not very many, but sometimes the building has a violation. And what we do is that what we request from the county is a partial release. So we say, okay, I know that all of building A has a violation, but I'm unit 820. Can I release 820 from that? And they send us an amount. It's super expensive. It's typically anywhere from $1,000 to $2,000. The seller has to pay it upfront. It's not a fun situation. It takes 30 days, but you have to get them and you release that unit from the lien that controls the whole building. However, there are liens, specifically unsafe structure liens, things like really bad damage to the building where the county won't release it. And if the county won't release it, that's it, we're stuck.
I've seen that twice, so are those probably the deals that become strictly cash? And then it's up to the buyer to
And then
say,
it's the
I'm okay
buyer
with.
to sign a hold harvest. And I'll be completely honest with you, when it comes to partial releases, I really dislike them. I really think that it is a fee by the county to offer these partial releases. They're charging $1,000 up opt for these partial releases to release your unit from X, Y, and Z liens. But tomorrow, the day after you get your partial release, they can go file another lien, and you're not released from that lien. So everything you did in order to close just went out the window, because all they have to do is is refile the lien, which they do often.
Good to know.
Mike, let me ask you, because you close the condos, new buyer, right?
Mhm.
New buyer, hey, I wanna buy, can we afford 280? What can I get?
Well, at that point, you do the search, I mean, at 280, obviously off the bat, that you can only, condo is what's most likely gonna be
Yeah,
happening. Yeah. No, I mean, I don't know how many condos I closed in Kendall at, the 250, 270, 280 mark,
But I say like, something that's only condo, so you're looking condo, and then do you do like, the your like lender for like the condo list? Do you do
Yeah,
that?
so I have the condo list, that's the first thing I start with, and I go down that list. If let's say I can't find something that they like or an association within that condo list, I'll go on the MLS, I'll do a regular search, and like I harped on that, I'll go one by one and pretty much look at the description. Some listing agents will post, this association has reserves. It also depends on your client, because now you're talking about if your specific client says, hey, I only have 5% to put down, then you need to. Yeah, if they're looking.
Usually they do unless it's an investor.
Exactly. So I mean, if you know that they're 5% down, then at that point you go down that list and you look at the description and see if they have the reserves. Sometimes listing agents do their due diligence and they'll look and they'll call the association before posting the listing and they'll put it on the description, or they will attach the budget to the
Yeah.
attachments. Okay, with those two things alone, you'll be able to tell them, hey, look, this community, this association has reserves. It qualifies for 3 to 5% down. Now, let's say you come across one, the pictures look nice, it might be an option for your client, but the listing agent didn't describe anything. There's no attachments. Instead of having to go through the listing agent, call the association. I was showing earlier that you could go on closed sales or most recent closed sales, and you could see if one of the other agents closed financing, and you could also see they have attachments there. Sometimes that
Yeah.
listing agent will have the attachments there. You pull that attachment, you send it to your lender. Hey, I need to know if this association qualifies or has reserves. Ariana, if my lender looks at it in 5 minutes, she'll tell me, hey, they have reserves,
Yeah.
or they don't have reserves. They don't have reserves. Obviously, this is not an option. I'll check it off my list and go to the next one.
Yeah, I look at I've done the same thing, I've gone to IMAP and then I call the buyer's agent and see what the hell they did or who they used or
Yeah.
whatever,
Yeah,
Usually if one could finance it, another one could, but
exactly.
it's like,
The MLS
It's
won't
so
tell,
time-consuming.
the thing is, the MLS won't tell you if they'll say conventional financing, but it won't tell you if they
yeah,
can.
yeah, but no,
Oh, and I'm not, yeah.
yeah, I'm not, you could check and you could see like there,
Yeah.
it'll tell you sometimes like, it won't tell you the percent, but you could see it and you're like, oh, it's 3%.
Exactly.
Or 3.5 or whatever.
Yeah.
But it helps a lot. I had a building that had major issues, and when we would talk to the association, they kept saying, oh, no, but people have closed your financing. I'm like, okay, which unit?
Yeah.
Which unit?
Or what
So
type of
then
financing,
we could see, how did we do it? Because, yeah, I'm all for it. If they can do it, we could do it.
Of course.
But, yeah, they could never tell me which units had closed, and they wouldn't provide any paperwork, and I was like, it's probably,
Yeah, the MLS.
a private lender or something.
Guys, the point I really wanna make.
And I look at the pending litigation, I try to call the HOAs for that.
Yeah, if there's, if they,
Pending
yeah,
Litigation, and the other thing too that they don't like is a lot of like, I don't know the percent, but a lot of rents.
Oh, that's happened to me twice as well.
yeah, I think it's over 50%, I think is what it is. Yeah, if you have,
Mostly primary.
Another point that I'd like to make, particularly for the newer agents, that this happened to me a lot, and I know it's gonna happen to them. A lot of times you might have a client that tells you, I'm looking for a townhouse, and 78% of townhouses, what we look at and what we recognize as a townhouse, we see the structure, we assume it's a townhouse, but it's actually a condo.
condo.
So all of this information applies to that as well. If you don't understand the difference or why or the reasoning behind it, you'll have a frustrated buyer because they'll continue to send you, if you don't set up the search appropriately, or they'll send you from Zillow 100 townhouses and you're like, but that's not a townhouse. But yes, it is. I'm looking at it, but it's not. So you have to, all of these rules and all of these regulations and all of these tips I'm giving you 100% will apply to those structures as well. I think that's something to do with airspace, right?
No, it's just considered lot and block, really. I mean, if a condo, if it's,
If it's a condo.
if it's a-
No, but I heard it's the builders.
It has something to
Is
do.
it with the builders?
There's
Well,
one
whether
with-
it's a.
Yeah, because a townhouse looks like a I mean,
Yeah.
And this information applies to that. I
You
usually.
go to
do
the
at end
legal
of the
description, you go to the legal
I filter
description,
by lot and lot.
and you see if the legal description says lot and block.
block.
Or you look at the Miami-Dade and if it has like a recorded lot size, if that means that it has like an individual lot, so
You
that
could
means it's
filter
a
just by the picture. When you put in the address,
No,
no.
wait.
No, because
No,
It
I
doesn't
usually
go
will
through it?
filter lot and block by my search.
So like
I'm
the
searching
aerial,
for-
like, you look at it through the aerial view when you pull up on Miami-Dade, can you pull up Miami-Dade there?
But I was saying, what's the reason that the builders, when they
The
build
builders,
those, why
because
they
of the form.
categorize it as a condo?
The zone.
But I think the zoning has something to do with.
Exactly.
airspace.
I heard about that they get like a tax break for
Yeah, maybe so.
categorizing it. as
Or
a
whatever,
condo.
whenever they build it, they either do it for like ownership purposes, like a condo, or like single family lot and blocks. And they do individual lots for each one. So for us, it looks the same, and you would never know unless you're in the business, and then when you do the financing, it makes a big difference. You see a two-story townhouse and you think, okay, finance.
Particularly when you're going at.
You look at the aerial on Miami-Dade.gov, and it usually, the whole community pull up hours, 10289
Sorry, I have a showing right now.
Southwest,
Southwest
They're not
77.
gonna-
Lock it in.
I went.
Is it a condo? Is it a condo?
Is it a condo? Now you're
Yeah.
ready.
Okay, good luck. So, see, like, this is a townhouse, lot and block. So what you know is
the legal description.
individually, it pops up, this is the individual lot. Oh, because you said the area, I thought you meant like Google.
No, I
Okay,
noticed
so-
that when you look up the condo style townhouses, it doesn't show you the individual unit. It does a
Yeah,
yellow
it does
thing
the whole
around
thing,
the whole
correct.
thing.
So here, you can't read it, but it says lot size and it says like 1,800 square feet. So you have a lot size, that's another good way. And then if you go up a little bit,
On the legal description.
in the it says legal description here, see if it gets clear.
It'll
It
say
says-
lot and block right here.
Lot and block. So there, you have like a house, like a lot 2, block 4.
Which you could also see on the MLS. Right when you pop up in the MLS, on the right hand side, there'll be a legal description. It'll just say blah, blah, blah condo or blah, 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 blah. And there's also ways to search for it, which I can show you. That's how I do it.
Trying to go now.
But
Well,
this
click
is
on the
important to know
condos right next door.
when you're-
And then when it's a condo, I'll show you how it looks like.
I didn't know that this little trick. I love it.
I mean. And if it's a condo, the legal description most of them says condo unit, whatever, and the lot size
Was it
will be
1298 Southwest?
10289 Southwest 77.
1298?
Is that a condo?
89
77.
17 court.
Or,
Yeah, go to the condos right next door, just to show it. Drag it over here. Man, why is it working so damn slow?
Yeah, I don't know. I think it's because of the Zoom that I have on the,
We're still on the Zoom,
yeah. I have it. It's like,
the recordings?
yeah.
Wow. And then go ahead, go over a little bit more. Click. Click on the.
This one right
arrow.
here.
So here. Scroll. You see, if it's a townhouse condo, it'll show you the whole community. It won't show you the individual lot, and then like down here. Put it up, because it'll probably clear up. It'll say lot size 0. Because there is no individual, even though we have a yard, it won't like record, it doesn't, you have a right to use it, but it's not really like yours on paper type of thing. They're like limited common areas. So you see? Here's the 0.
All right, guys, I appreciate you all joining today. If you guys have any questions, feel free to reach out to me on a personal basis, and I'll be able to talk with you more in depth and go over some of the things I spoke about today as far as condos go. Thank you all.